Aloha, welcome to this practice WAD E26, 5 problems every software engineer should be able to solve, part 1. Santiago Valderrama wrote a very interesting blog about 5 problems every software engineer should be able to solve in an hour, in less than an hour. If they can't solve that, then you don't hire them as a software engineer. We're not going to do all 5 problems. We're going to do, in part 1, we're going to do problem 1, and in part 2, we'll do problem 2. Very good blog. You should probably read it and practice some of the problems that he suggests you do. So what we're going to do is we're going to work with GitHub, Git, IDEA, or IntelliJ IDEA, JavaScript, underscore, and ESLint to solve the first problem, and we're going to do it as a practice WAD. So we're going to start by starting my timer. I got my little timer app. Start. Then I'm going to create an empty GitHub repo called sum of numbers. So I'll go to my repositories, new, sum of numbers. I'm going to make it private. You can make it public if you want, doesn't matter. Add a README file. Actually, I'll make it public. That way no, I'll make it private. And then if you want the TA to have access to it, you need to add them as a collaborator. So we're going to create the repository. I did have my README file. I want to download my repository from GitHub to my laptop. So I'm going to open with GitHub Desktop. Open GitHub Desktop. See, it's going Cam Moore sum of numbers. My local path on my laptop, you need to make sure that there aren't any spaces in it. I like to have a directory under my home directory called GitHub, where I store my GitHub repos, my local copies of the GitHub repos. I also want to have an organization. Maybe I have the organization here or some way of organizing my repositories. So since this is ICS 314, I have an ICS 314 directory. I have an ICS 211 directory. I got ICS 414 directory. I've got all sorts of directories under my GitHub repository. So I hit clone, and it's cloning it locally. And then I want to open this repo in IntelliJ. And to do that, what I've done is I've set up my GitHub desktop. So I go to Preferences, go to Integrations. The external editor, you can choose different external editors to open the repo in. So I chose IntelliJ, and you can select the shell that you want to use if you're going to open it in the shell. So I make sure it's that. So I can just hit the open in IntelliJ, which is really nice feature. Yep. And then it goes here. Didn't open the right screen. So I've got my repository. It's in GitHub, ICS 314, sum of numbers. So it's the same place. I have my .idea directory and my README file. And now I want to make sure that I've set up my Java coding standards. So I want to make sure that I'm using the coding standards, template. So I'll go to Preferences, Editor, Code Style. We're using the ICS SE code style. Excellent. I want to turn off the inspections for JavaScript. So JavaScript inspections, make sure that I turn them all off, but I want to open up and I want to turn on ESLint, and I want it to be an error so it really pops out on the screen. And then lastly, I want to enable, I want to make sure that JavaScript, we're using the ECMAScript 6+ as our language. And I want to turn on ESLint. I want it to be automatic, so we're going to go do that. Okay. And now I've done that. So now I need to download some sample files. And so I need to download the sample ESLint RC, so I could just open it, copy it, create the file, or I prefer to right mouse click and say save link as, and then you got to make sure it's going to the right place. And since I did this previously, it's going to my GitHub, into 314, into the sum of numbers directory. That's exactly where I want it. Hit save. I want to save my sample package. Make sure it's going to sum of numbers. Got it. Save. And my sample, git ignore. Save. Now I go back here. I've got my files. I need to rename this. So function F6 or F6 on a PC. No, escape. Shift F6, sorry. I want it to say .eslintrc.js. Function shift F6. My git ignore. And my sample package should be just package.json. Now, the git ignore is saying we don't want any IML files, because those are telling IntelliJ how to set up the project. And it has paths that are for the project on my hard drive. Now, it also, if I'm sharing this repo or this project with other people, they might put the repository in a different place. And you want them to be able to put it wherever they want it. So that does it. The .idea directory says we don't want all of this stuff in here because this has stuff that is specific to my hard drive. Let's see if I can find one. Nope. Yeah, there's some specific stuff in here that are specific to my machine that may not be the same for other machines. So we don't want any of that stuff. Okay, so now we've got that. I can add them. I can always add them, or I can go into GitHub and see that it's saying I'm going to add them. So I can do it in GitHub Desktop. So now we did that. So we want to run npm install so we can open a shell. Or I like to do it in IntelliJ. Just go in here, and then I can say npm install, and that will reach out and grab the npm packages from the internet, install them locally into our node modules directory. There's our node modules. Again, we don't want to push node modules onto GitHub because it's got a whole bunch of binary stuff that's tailored to the architecture of my laptop. And if you have a different machine or a Windows machine, then those binary files won't work on those machines, so we don't want to store that. We do want to store the package.json file. So we do want to do that. We want to do the package.lock, which tells us what versions we're using. We got all that. So now we need to create an index.html file. So up here, new, I can say file, or I can do HTML file, index.html. I don't have to type the .html if I choose, because I'd set a new HTML file. I can add it, and don't ask me again, always add it. And now, because on my laptop I have different versions of Node, and I'm using a Node version manager, I need to tell it which version of Node I'm using. I'm going to use 17.5. And then you can see that we ran, so there's no problems. ESLint ran. I'm going to change the title to sum of numbers. And then I want to create where's my second file? Sum of numbers.js. So I want, again, new, I can go JavaScript or new file. Sum of numbers. And it got automatically added to my GitHub, or Git, excuse me, not GitHub, added to Git. And now I want to go back and I need to load the underscore library. So I copy this line, put it in my head after the title. And then I want to load my JavaScript file, sum of numbers, and that needs to happen after I have loaded the underscore, because we're going to use underscore in sum of numbers, and if you load sum of numbers before you load underscore, then it's not defined and it won't work. So it's very, very important that you load underscore before you load sum of numbers. So we got that. So what are we going to do? We're going to write 4 functions that return the sum of the numbers in a given list using a for loop, a while loop, recursion, and underscore. We're going to call them sum for, sum while, sum recursion, and sum the simple way. So let's start with sum for. So we want to go into sum of numbers. That's propeller E or control E. Allows us to quickly switch between. So we're going to create a function called sum of 4 that is going to sum up a list of numbers. So what we might want to do is create const test nums. These are our nums that we're going to use. And it's an array or list, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can see that there are 5 errors in this file, and they're ESLint errors. And we see the red marker here, and it's an ESLint. And if you do F2, or function F2, you jump to the first error. So test nums is assigned but never used. Okay, that's fine. We're going to use it later. The next one, F2, there's a space after the comma. So let's put spaces. And notice the errors are going away. And I'm down to 1 error, which my test nums isn't being used. So now let's write our function, sum for. It takes some nums. And we're going to use a for loop to sum up all the numbers in nums. So we need to keep track of the running totals with a local variable. So we want to say let, because it's going to change. Let's call it total. We initialize it. Starts at 0. So now we want to write a for loop, and we're going to update total. So we use for const num of nums. So this is a ECMAScript 6 feature of writing a for loop where we're going to incrementally assign num to each value in the nums array or list. This is very helpful JavaScript feature, ECMAScript feature. So now we want to say total plus equals num. So all the values in nums is going to be added to total. And we have an ESLint error which says we're using it, we assign it, but we don't ever use it because we didn't. So now we should say return total. And we got an ESLint error here, we're missing a blank line. or we can hit save. So now we just have two ESLint errors. Test nums is not used, and sum for is not used. So let's use both of them. Sum for test nums. Save it. Green check mark. We have no problems. Excellent, excellent. So now let's go propeller E or Control E to get back to here. Let's run it in Chrome. And let's open the console. And I'm doing Command Option J. I think it's Control Alt J on Windows. And we can see that I print out 10, which is the sum of the first 4 digits. Excellent. So now what do we need to do? We need to do sum while. I'm going to use an arrow function because it's a function. Is equal to the function nums. It's an arrow function. So this is it. I could have said function sum while and the parameters. I'm going to show you the arrow function, which is another way in JavaScript 6 to write functions. So again, we need to keep track of the total. Equals 0. And now we need a while loop. While. We need to probably keep track of the position in the thing. So let I equals 0. So we're going to start at 0 and then we're going to go. So while I is less than nums dot length, right? So while I is still in there, we're going to say total plus equal nums sub I. Now, and then we're going to return total. But I still have this red squiggly saying I is never reassigned. Oh, I forgot to update I in my while loop. I plus plus. So the ESLint saved me from having an infinite loop. That is amazing. I love that. So I need my semicolon. So again, I haven't used sum while, so while test nums, save it, go back to our here, and we see the first 10 for sum for, we see the second 10 for sum while. That's excellent. That shows that it's working. So let's go on. What do we have? Some recursion. Function, some recursion. Nums. Back to the function version. Recursion, we need a base case. If nums dot length is equal to 0. There's nothing in it. What is the answer? We return 0. So now we need to do the else. We need the recursion, so we say return nums sub 0 plus the recursive call. And now I need to make nums 1 smaller, which if I use the slice function, and I go from 1 to nums dot length, that returns an array that goes from 1 to the length. So it's 1 shorter. And that is, again, a nice feature of JavaScript where we know that the slice function returns a copy of that, of the nums array without the first one, because we're taking 1 through. And then ESLint is saying, oh, I don't need this. The else is redundant because I have a return in here, so I don't need the else. That's nice. So again, they're giving me good hints. Move that, remove that. And then I've got a thing so I can hit Option Command L or Control Alt L, I believe, on Windows. And that does that. So now console.log sum recursion test nums. And what do we get? We have 3 10s. Excellent. So what do we need to do now? We want to do underscore sum the simple way. Again, I'm just using arrow functions for jollies. So now we want to do using underscore. So let's look at underscore dot, if I can type, score.js. And then I need to take an array and move it to a single value. And so we're looking at an array, and is there, oh, there, it's under collection. So reduce takes a list, takes a function, an iterary, and then so here's an example: var sum equals reduce function memo num return memo plus, and we initialize it with, oh, that's exactly what we want to do. So let's copy that. But instead of this array, we want to do nums. And oh, let's just, and we need our semicolon. And we get an undefined. That is because we didn't return. The value of this reduction is something, but it's not returned by default, so we need to return it. And there we get our 4 10s. And so now what do we need to do? We want to make sure ESLint, we've been checking that the whole way. Make sure we got our green check mark. Oh, unexpected blocks. Since we just do a return, I'm going to get ESLint to fix it. So I can just make it 1 line. I've got my green check mark. Commit my program to GitHub. Summary, finished in 23 min. Commit to main. I've made a commit, so all the code is now in the main branch on my local machine, but it's not been pushed up to GitHub, so I need to push up to GitHub. And then I want to check to see that it got to GitHub, so I can just click on the view on GitHub. And there are my files. They're up there. Excellent. I could also go back here and refresh this and see that it's there. But didn't need to do that. Done. So, stop my timer. How'd I do? 25 minutes. So I did it in average time. Excellent. Record your time because you're going to talk about it in your technical essay. Hopefully, you can do this problem, and if you didn't make it in before the DNF time, practice it again, start again, get another repo, download it, do the steps, take a look at the underscore documentation. It's very helpful. Aloha.